But as the overall standard of life has gone up in the United States, its citizens have become increasingly reticent to work in the fields for such little pay. So who's doing the work? Well, that's where migrant workers come in. Starting around World War II, the U.S. implemented the Bracero program, which authorized the importation of nearly 5 million temporary workers from Mexico to support the agriculture industry. Since then, the heavy flow of migrant workers has kept U.S. farms viable, although at a severe cost to the workers themselves.
Yes, my name is David Grossberg, and I'd like to know, do you think the children of illegal aliens should be allowed to attend Texas public schools free, or do you think that their parents should pay for their education?
Who are you addressing that to?
I think you're first in this.
He was looking right at you. I said he was. Look, I'd like to see something done about the illegal alien problem that would be so sensitive and so understanding about labor needs and human needs that that problem wouldn't come up. But today, if those people are here, I would reluctantly say I think they would get whatever it is that they're, what the society is giving to their neighbors. But the problem has to be solved. The problem has to be solved because as we have kind of made illegal some kinds of labor that I'd like to see legal, we're doing two things. We're creating a whole society of really honorable, decent, family-loving people that are in violation of the law, and secondly, we're exacerbating relations with Mexico. The answer to your question is much more fundamental than whether they attend Houston schools, it seems to me. I don't want to see if they're living here, I don't want to see a whole thing of 6- and 8-year-old kids being made, one totally uneducated and made to feel that they're living with outside the law. Let's address ourselves to the fundamentals. These are good people, strong people. Part of my family is a Mexican.
Can I add to that? I think the time has come that the United States and our neighbors, particularly our neighbor to the south, should have a better understanding and a better relationship than we've ever had. Rather than making them or talking about putting up a fence, why don't we work out some recognition of our mutual problems, make it possible for them to come here legally with a work permit, and then while they're working and earning here, they pay taxes here. And when they want to go back, they can go back and they can cross and open the border both ways by understanding their problems. This is the only safety valve right now they have.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more by hiring a record number of new border guards.
It was a bad time for California. First of all, there was a serious economic downturn having to do with the end of the Cold War and cuts in defense spending. A lot of the bases were here in California, so lots of jobs were lost. The real estate went south, unemployment went up, and it coincided with 10 years or so of very high immigration from Latin America, including Mexico, Central America. Wars were raging in Central America at the time as well. So, and then you had the riots in LA just a couple of years before. You had the earthquake in 1994, the Northridge earthquake. I mean, it seemed like California was going to hell, essentially. And so, at the time with this demographic change that was going really fast at the time, people were not used to it. well, there was a reaction to it. And this was the reaction. This group of citizens in Orange County decided this was too much, and these, immigrants were to blame for something,
In the 1980s, El Padrino founded the Guadalajara cartel. This was the first Mexican group to work with Colombian criminals to traffic cocaine into the United States. When he was captured and imprisoned, he split his empire into 5 smaller cartels to make it harder to destroy. In Mexico, cartel structure is better imagined as a series of rings than as a pyramid. The drug trade in Mexico employs 500,000 people. The cartels pay people from all kinds of backgrounds, including Americans, to smuggle drugs across the border. The most common way for drugs to enter the US is in the back of a truck. Only 20% of trucks crossing the border into the United States are inspected. An estimated 95% of the cocaine entering the US passes through Mexico. Mexico also supplies 80% of our meth and up to 2/3 of our marijuana. At the busiest border crossing in Texas, a truck enters the country every 15 seconds.
Where did Mexican cartels come from in the first place? And can their origins give us any insight into how to destroy them? The new groups were better organized, better equipped, and operated more as an actual business rather than scattered groups looking to make a quick profit. Meanwhile, in Central and South America, these cartels specialized in mass production of drugs were reaching a high point due to exponential rise in American demand for cocaine, taking advantage of the political and government instability to spread regional control. Infamous names, especially the Colombian-based cartels of Pablo Escobar, became household names. Our friends down south still had one major hurdle to overcome, and that was how to physically move their products from South American manufacturing plants into the hands of Americans, and that answer was Mexico. Using the already in place logistics and history of Mexican smuggling operations, South American cartels became established along the Mexican-American border, both rivaling and working in tandem with the Mexican cartel groups. What resulted was a flood of cheap drugs entering into the United States, spiking addiction rates, and spreading drug-related crime across the United States.
Everywhere the Garcia family goes, they go together, often hand in hand. It's gotten too dangerous in Riviera del Bravo for anyone to be alone.
Todas están solas. Todas esas casas están destruidas.
This family has stayed in one of the most dangerous areas of Juarez. Most of their neighbors have already fled.
A murder scene in Mexico's murder capital. Unfazed, drug cartels here continue to battle it out in the streets. Many frightened people hear the shots, but wait to come out until security forces arrive. The police, backed by soldiers, count 35 bullets fired here. The body count in Ciudad Juarez is still rising, but officials say at a much slower rate than in previous months.
Militarily speaking, we are in better situation than the drug lords, but sometimes they do show up with weapons that we do not have.
But even with soldiers in the streets, some say they still feel unsafe.
Robberies and kidnappings have not gone down, but executions, yes, those have dropped.
For everything that crosses the border in one direction, from south to north. But the border's criminal economy wouldn't work without one key ingredient that goes the other way. Every year, hundreds of thousands of American guns are smuggled illegally into Mexico. America's powerful firearms industry and its permissive gun laws are partly to blame. In Texas alone, there are more than 5,000 stores where anyone with an ID, a credit card, and a reasonably clean criminal record can buy a gun. And those are just the licensed ones. Richard Garcia teaches firearms safety at one of them.
So with this one, we'll lock it back to the rear. That way we can actually check to make sure it's unloaded. You want to shoot some?
No, thank you. If I were to come in here looking for a rifle to protect myself and my home, what are you going to show me?
This kind of being what everybody's starting to clamor after. It's a semi-automatic rifle, got a safety on it, it's got sights, very easy to use and very easy to point, and we also have an extendable buttstock. It's just very user-friendly.
You're selling guns to people. Do you ever worry about what they're going to do with them?
Now, it is at our discretion that we can refuse service to people. If we ever feel that somebody may be trying to buy a gun illegally or purchasing for somebody else, we immediately stop the sale and tell them, I'm sorry, I can't help you. But if somebody decides that they're gonna buy a gun legally here and go sell it in Mexico, that's that guy's character. He's gonna break the law, whether he's doing it with guns. I mean, he might be doing it with drugs too. I can't control what an individual's gonna do.
One of the reasons so many guns get smuggled from the US into Mexico is because it's easy. One extremely weird thing about this border is that in one direction, from Mexico into the US, it's one of the most tightly controlled, if not the most tightly controlled borders in the world. In this direction, from the US into Mexico, it's virtually open. If you just go through the nothing to declare lane, you go through as we're going through right now, nobody stops you, nobody asks you anything.
Una arma. No es tanto requisito como aquí en México. Tiene que estar tu vida en peligro y aún así no te hacen caso, no puedes portarla. Solamente que seas un policía. Entonces en Estados Unidos, pues como quien dice, cualquier gente puede traerlo. Es lo que se mira siempre.
Cualquier gente puede entrar a una tienda de pistolas y comprar un arma.
Comprar un arma.
¿Y quiénes son esas personas, las que cruzan la mercancía?
Pues más bien personas que usan drogas, porque son los que más fácil acceden. No piensan que los van a agarrar o ellos nomás quieren el dinero y hacen las cosas.
¿Usualmente son personas que tienen pasaporte americano?
Sí, de Estados Unidos. Son los que lo hacen.
In case you think corruption is a uniquely Mexican problem, the whole system wouldn't work without some help from the other side. And the sorts of cross-border relationships that are common here exist in the underworld too. ¿Y ustedes también tienen personas que trabajan del otro lado, que trabajan para las autoridades estadounidenses?
Sí, es mucho dinero. O sea, hay corrupción como la hay aquí en México, la hay allá. Yo estoy conectada por parte de mi esposo. Él trabaja de aquel lado. Y él fue el que me metió en esto.
Él trabaja para las autoridades de aquel lado, dices.
De aquel lado, ajá.
You know how many people were killed in Juarez last year? No, a lot. Yeah, I think 3,000 is a lot. It's a different species, counselor. They will rip out your liver and feed it to your dog.
People coming in and out from Mexico to the United States, vice versa. And look at all these cars. It's always just such a long wait to come in by car. It's always better. lovely day today. We're heading back home now. We got some good food. We got a painting. It's spray painted. We got it for $5, 100 pesos.
Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. Things like morphine and heroin are opiates that are made from the poppy plant, versus fentanyl is a synthetic made in a lab opioid that hits the opioid receptor. It's really potent, it's really strong. We use it in the hospital all the time. It's a really safe drug when used properly by doctors and nurses. If you find someone who's overdosed on fentanyl or another opioid, you should call 911. And if you have Narcan, naloxone, you should administer to them. The two most common ways it's administered are intranasally through the nose, and then also an injection. And in California, you can get Narcan, naloxone. Anyone can get it without a prescription. CPR and definitely administering Narcan are all 100% safe to do.
I think most people don't even realize is a really important medicine. And so it's something that we use therapeutically for people for a number of reasons every day.
In 1960, it was meant to treat medical patients with severe pain so bad existing painkillers couldn't do the job. Doctors thought this was the alternative anesthetic they'd been looking for surgeries. In medicinal form, it's carefully prescribed by doctors for specific medical situations. But beginning in 2013, fentanyl hit the streets. Drug dealers found that mixing a little bit of illicit fentanyl into heroin could make their product much more potent. The white powder could be pressed into counterfeit pain pills that look like Vicodin or Xanax. The white powder is measured in milligrams, and it only takes a few grains for someone to overdose. It's 50 times more powerful than heroin, and 100 times more powerful than morphine. In 2013, more than 3,000 people died. But in 2017, fentanyl claimed the lives of close to 30,000 people.
4 years ago, we see zero fentanyl in Arizona. Zero, not any. Last year, we see hundreds of pounds of fentanyl powder and hundreds of thousands of tablets.
Fentanyl's actually FDA approved for, really is for chronic pain that if you've previously been on morphine or something similar to that, just really isn't cutting it.
Dwayne Davidson is a clinical pharmacy practice manager with University Health. He says if a patient is using morphine but has a pain spike, fentanyl is often prescribed in varying formulations.
Some that work really quickly, like lollipops and lozenges you kind of suck on like candy. We also have patches that you wear for 2 to 3 days, even to kind of provide some of that background pain.
Americans got hooked on prescription painkillers. Next, addicted users moved on to more potent drugs. The explanation for the rise of fentanyl begins in the late 1990s.
Since I've been on this new pain medication, I have not missed one day of work, and my boss really appreciates that. Lauren is there every day.
That's when pharmaceutical companies began advertising new opioids that were supposedly non-addictive.
But these are the same drugs that have a reputation for causing addiction and other terrible things. They do not have serious medical side effects, and so these drugs, which I repeat are our best, strongest pain medications, should be used much more than they are for patients in pain.
American doctors started prescribing opioids like Oxycontin, Percocet, and Vicodin at record numbers, and overdoses began spiking. In regulated medical settings, fentanyl is often delivered by injection or as a patch or lozenge, forms which allow the drug to be released gradually.
Mexico's president dismissed claims that traffickers in his country are responsible for the flow of fentanyl into the U.S.
Fentanyl deaths are climbing in the U.S., a crisis that institutions like Congress and the DEA are struggling to tackle. Now, one international leader is placing blame on the U.S., suggesting fentanyl is the country's problem. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador reportedly said Mexico does not produce the drug, adding, "We do not have consumption of fentanyl."
I'm in Phoenix, Arizona on a mission. Eat good Mexican food, discover new cacti, and find out if immigrants are stealing American jobs. Arizona has some of the strictest immigration laws in the country. To understand the immigrant labor economy better, I met up with Masabi Perea.
Okay, so we are gonna go to 2 Home Depots that are in this area.
He's an organizer who heads up a local workers center who introduced me to some workers. ¿Y por qué viniste aquí a Phoenix, a los Estados Unidos?
Porque por la situación en México es muy dura. Como todos sabemos, todos siempre vamos por el sueño americano.
But it hasn't always been the dream imagined. Ernesto and Danielle have been living and working in the U.S. for over a decade, and both are undocumented.
No venimos a robar ningún tipo de trabajo, sino venimos a trabajar con esfuerzo.
Pues una jornada de un trabajador, de un varillero, es empezar, como ahorita que está el tiempo de calor, tratamos de estar muy temprano, 5 de la mañana, a lo mejor hasta más temprano, ganándole al sol.
When do we take a break? In recent years, things have gotten even harder for these workers thanks to 2 laws in particular, the so-called Show Me Your Papers law and one that requires employers to check a worker's legal status. E-Verify, SB 1070, ¿cómo cambió el ámbito de trabajo y cómo afectó a sus comunidades?
Fue algo muy duro, muy difícil. Está uno con temor en sus casas sin poder salir y pensando que cualquier rato pues te pueden deportar. Era un momento muy difícil.
Between 2009 and 2012, the number of undocumented workers in Arizona fell by 40%, which caused the GDP on average to drop by 2% every year. Some people say that's okay. The pie might have gotten smaller, but so-called real Americans got a bigger slice of it. But it also affected employers, like egg farm owner Glenn Hickman, who says he lost legal employees because they had undocumented family members.
The whole family went to some state that they felt was more tolerant of immigrants.
SB 1070 hit this community in particularly really hard in a very negative way.
Roberto Reyes owns a landscaping company here in Phoenix. He says Arizona's immigration laws are out of touch with economic realities.
I got to see a lot of the houses we boarded up, houses that were abandoned, and I don't think all of them were abandoned because people couldn't afford them. There was a lot of houses we went to that, like stuff that was very important to them, they just left. In my mind, someone like probably got deported or they just had to leave really fast.
What would your company look like if you couldn't hire any immigrant workers?
I don't know if we would have a company, honestly.
Work is work, and not every job is fulfilling. Sometimes it's just hard and sweaty and dirty and those kind of things. So I think that we should have a policy in the United States that accommodates the need for those workers that can come here.
In Alabama, farming is more than just a way of life. It's the state's #1 industry, and until recent years relied heavily on immigrant workers. But 6 years ago, Alabama introduced the country's harshest anti-illegal immigration law, and undocumented workers left in droves.
They really didn't like it, especially the ones that had a big crop in the field and they lost all their workers.
Third-generation farmer Scott Benton says the effect on farming was devastating.
Pretty bad that year. Like I said, a lot of people left, and all the workers left, and people were, they already had the crops out there ready to harvest, so they didn't have anybody to pick them. So a lot of farms lost their whole crop and went out of business because they lost all their money.
The wide sweeping law made it illegal to hire or house undocumented workers, and even Hispanic school children were targeted by the authorities. Aware of the need for agricultural workers, Jerry Spencer turned to unemployed Americans, but says after 2 weeks most couldn't cope.
The farmer says, start over here and end over here. And that was the extent of their instructions. With the American workers, they all had to be taught all this and separate. And in addition to the fact that their bodies just were not built for it.
Within weeks of being enacted, the law faced legal challenges from the federal government and local businesses, who say it cost Alabama billions in lost income and taxes. Some of the thousands of Latinos who fled the state have begun to return.
There you go. You have a blessed day, okay?
All right.
But for many business owners, the law has left a bitter taste.
You can't just say, hey, I'm going to get rid of these people, and then look at the farmers that are left without workers.
Ya está. ¿Ya es el tuyo, Jessica? Ya lo acabé. Ya.
I started working when I was 11 years old.
It feels like you don't got no choices. You don't feel the same as other kids.
And many kids who are working on large commercial farms. The child labor law in the U.S. is pretty good, except when it comes to agriculture. And then it has a big gaping hole. U.S. law allows children to work in agriculture at far younger ages for unlimited hours outside of school in much more dangerous conditions than any other sector. So a child can work perfectly legally for any farmer at age 12. That child couldn't work serving the food, that he can work 10, 12, 14 hours picking. Farm work is actually the most dangerous occupation that's open to kids in the U.S. in terms of fatalities. Kids are working with dangerous and sharp tools, doing work that may require them to be bent down for hours. Kids are working because their families really need the money. When children work so many hours during school and over the summers, it really hurts their education. Kids who migrate leave school early and go back to school late, missing weeks or months of school every year. These kids are from Texas, where school started 3 days ago. Now, some of these kids will enroll in Michigan schools when those start up in a couple of weeks. Others will just wait till they get back down to Texas.
It was hard to catch up in school. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy for me because sometimes I'll be there in class and my friends know everything I didn't know. And it was hard, and sometimes I feel like embarrassed because I never catch up with them.
It's not right that these kids, and including me, that I lost my childhood and other children should lose their childhood as well.
When I turned 14, that's when I dropped out from school and went to the strawberries in Florida. And then we came back to Ohio and started working on the pickles, harvesting.
Before dawn, migrant laborers in the California desert. Despite triple-digit temperatures still to come, they wear long sleeves, scarves, and bandanas to protect themselves from the sun and from dust. Their job today? To pick the purple grapes you'll snack on tomorrow. They're all veterans, and they're all Mexican. Benjamin Rodriguez has worked in the California fields for 32 years. He knows his grapes, which are called uvas in Spanish, and he's teaching me the trade.
Here's what I'm learning. You got to get rid of the green ones. But sometimes the green ones are way down, and if you miss them, and they get to the grocery store, and then you go to the grocery store to buy grapes, the same green ones, you'll complain to the store will complain to the ranch, and the ranch will complain to me, the worker.
You make $8 an hour minimum wage, and split 30 cents for each big box of grapes you pack between 3 partners. The third is Benjamin's wife, Maria, who is loading up the grapes for the grocery store. Maria and Benjamin have 5 children, 2 of them grown. They, like all the other workers here, won't discuss their immigration status. But if you're legal, you would usually seek a less punishing occupation. Either way, taxes are taken out of all the paychecks. They each make a base rate of $64 for the day. After taxes, it's about $45 for the 8 hours.
He's a real good worker.
Santos Montemayor is the man who does the hiring in these fields.
So for 15 years, you've been hiring labor crews to do agriculture work.
Right.
How many Americans have you hired over the 15 or 16 years?
None. Not one.
I mean, has one ever expressed interest?
Nope. Not to come and work in the fields, no.
The temperature has now climbed to 102.
As it gets hotter and the sun gets brighter, your mind starts playing tricks with you. Is it purple? Is it green? You start not being able to make out the colors anymore.
Una que es indocumentada no puede aplicar para estampillas, no puede conseguir ayuda federal ni estatal de ningún tipo. Entonces, o trabaja, o se muere de hambre, así tal cual.
Well, obviously, I mean, I would say the border should be shut down. I mean, this is ridiculous what's going on. You shut it down. You do need to construct a wall. I said, I mean, you guys saw us build those bridges. I'll send those people down to the southern border to build. I'll do that. We'll get it done. You also need to just have a policy. If you come across the border illegally, you get sent back. You don't get a notice to appear for a trial in 2 years. What kind of a deterrent is that? It doesn't work.